Today's free art lesson is going to be on 5 values. I did part 1. I showed making piles of color out of white and a dark color, say purple, and having 5 distinct values. 3 being right in between 5 and 1. This is white, that's cobalt violet, and then making a 3 that's right in between. This is number 2, that's in between 3 and 1, and then 4 is in between 3 and 5. And we painted on a black and white photo, and I showed how you can just take an old photo out of the newspaper and break it down and paint right on top of it. And in 5 values, you can tell what that is, even though it's not in color. You can tell it's some ball players doing something, some people. So that's pretty interesting. Now what we're going to do now is we're going to do exercise number 2, which is we're going to take those values that we mixed up, those 5 values, and we're going to try to figure out what this would be on a color photo. What these exercises do, and I suggest you do them in your studio when you don't feel like painting one day, don't want to start any big project, is just grab a newspaper and mix up 5 values and paint right on the newspaper. Because what you're doing is you're training your eye to identify values and to group values. A newspaper photo may have, 25 or 30 values in it, and you have to break them down into 5. So, where there may be a 12, 13, and 14, number 12, 13, and 14, if you were having value scale, you're just saying that number 12, 13, and 14 is going to be number 3. So it's a good way of averaging all the values. So now what we're going to do is we're going to do a color photo, because color will throw you off. You may look at that green water and you may say, wow, I think that's a number 4 or number 3. You might find that that's not true. So what we're going to do is we're going to paint right on this photo and try to make this photo in 5 values. And it should still read like a guy on a longboard on a wave. So let's stick with my method of painting number 5 first. Reason for that is the easiest to figure out. The darkest darks are always the easiest to figure out. So we know his shorts and right up here in his hair area is going to be the darkest dark. So we're going to paint that number 5. So we start in here and we just paint that one little area on his head, number 5, and we paint this part of his pants, number 5. Now, we know we're right because that paint just blended right into that color on that photo. It actually looks right already, so we know number 5 was perfect. Well, it usually is. 5's easy and 1's easy. It gets a little hairy after that, but that's why we're working on the exercise. So let's take number 1 now, which is just pure white. And let's paint pure white on the lightest part of this photo. So the lightest part of this photo, and what we're doing is we're averaging. Now, you see how that white is a little bit different than the wave? That's okay. We want to save our number 2. It's a little bit lighter than the wave if you squint your eye, but we're still going to say that that's a number 1, okay? That's the whole thing, is training your eye to average, because I'm going to need that number 2, so I can't make the wave number 2 right off the bat. I need to make it number 1. So I'm not going to paint this whole picture, but I'm just going to put some white in there. We know that that's the wave. We know that little bit of board is number 1, and a little highlight on his ankle and up there, okay? And along this wave, right along this wave, there's a little bit of white. Working on this is making me homesick because I live at the beach, so I'm getting a little homesick painting this. All right, so now number 5's done and number 1's done. Now let's go to number 4. What looks like number 4 on here? Remember, it's the second darkest dark. So what we got to do is we'll pick some up and we'll try placing it in different places. So we know well, I actually got that 4 a little bit too light. Let's go ahead and make that darker. I got that 4 about a number 3 right now, so that's why it's not reading right. Let's go ahead and make this 4 so that it matches this. There we go, that's better. All right, so now let's put it in. Let's put it in under his arm, on the back of his elbow, just a little tap on his elbow and down this forearm, and on his face. Okay, behind the leg. See how it melts right in? I mean, it's almost like when you're painting on it, it's a little different, but it's not real different. So I'm going to paint under the board with a number 4 too. So basically, the top of his head is a number 4 also. Okay? All right, so I know that I got number 5 done, number 1 done, number 4 done. Now I'm going to go to number 2 because it's the second easiest to figure out. Let's see, no, it's the fourth because it's 5, 1, 4, and now we're working on 2. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that 2 and see where that 2 is. And usually the 1s and 2s are on the light surfaces, the parts that the light hits. So it's pretty easy to figure out that probably number 2 is right along his back, and and that little bit of his skin showing right there is still going to be a number 2 because it's the same value as his shirt, but it's a different color. And that's what I mean by color throwing you off, because you would have never suspected probably that could be a 2. And look, that when I put a number 2 over the light parts of his skin, that's the right value for the light part of his skin too. And that's a really small shape, so I can't really do it. But see how it matches? All right, so that's tell you what, that's pretty close to that too. So guess what? That whole thing, see how I dabbed it on there? When you dab it on there, it blends right in, doesn't it? So that tells you that this is also a number 2. So what I'm going to do is just paint all the way around. Look how that blends right in to the color. So we know that that's a number 2. So guess what the last big shape is? What's left? We did 5, 1, 4, 2. The only thing left is a 3. That's the cool thing. You don't have to think 3 out because 3 is already done by process of elimination. So we'll take 3. We'll make sure 3 is that color because we're going to need pretty much of it. I want to tap it right onto my value scale. You need to make one of these. You need to have one hanging in your studio or take one outside with you because this thing is irreplaceable. And it looks a little bit light. Looks a little bit light, so I'm going to darken it down just a tad so I can see some difference in it. There we go. I want it to be darker than the rest. But watch when I get finished. When I get rid of the green, how it reads right. It's called reading right. You'll be able to tell it's a guy riding a surfboard or standing on the end of something. You might not know it's a surfboard, but you see now how that's, and what I'll do, I'll just darken it down just a little bit more so that it reads right. You don't have to stick with the piles. The piles are just to get you going. But it's obvious that this wave is darker than the water behind it. So I've got to make sure that I get it dark enough to read right. And there you go. And when you squint your eyes, that thing makes you can tell somebody's standing on something with a wave and some spray coming out the back. So do a few of these on color pictures and train your eye to work in 5 values at first, and then tweak it and adjust it up here as needed. Forget about that after you get it blocked in. Once you start getting, you know what the lightest light is, the darkest dark. And I bet you I could ask you now, what's the darkest dark? So when you start painting it, let's say you wipe this off or you soak it up and get all that paint off there, you could actually paint over top of this underpainting with the real colors. But I bet if I ask you, you'll know what the darkest dark is because you remember painting it in. If I ask you what the lightest light is, you would remember automatically it was the water. So it's a great way to underpaint, study the values, and get a good start on a painting. Get going, whether it's studio or plein air. I hope you enjoyed this free art lesson on values. If you'd like to see more about me, please go to MikeRooneyStudios.blogspot.com.